So, Identity 5 and Angels of Death. What's happening with that? Announced all the way back in July, we were told that an Identity 5 x Angels of Death crossover was coming soon. Yet, we as a community haven't heard literally anything else about it since then. I even rushed out a sloppy prediction video because usually they spring these crossovers on us relatively quick, but after Bunga Dogs, I've learned that I'm allowed to be a bit more patient with these things. Still, now that the aforementioned Bunga Dogs crossover is nearing the end of its excitement, lest they spring an unforeseen part 3 on us, it's starting to beg the question, at least in my mind, hey, so what the hell happened to Angels of Death? Well, I have a particular theory as for why we've been so starved for information, and that leads me into my redo predictions for Identity 5 x Angels of Death. And just a quick warning, I may discuss or show like some spoilers for the game or the anime in this video, so maybe don't watch it just yet if you want to check out the source first, since I highly recommend going into it blind, or blind-ish. So since the cast here is pretty small, pretty perfect to fill up a 4-character essence and put one in the shop, here are my theories. I know last time I started with Rachel, but this time I'm going to start with Zach. Now, originally, I ended up predicting these characters with a sort of grossly mixed bag between survivors and hunters, but this time I'm going to give at least one survivor option and at least one hunter option for each character, just to cover my bases. I'm pretty firmly of the belief now that all of the characters barring Rachel will be hunters, but just to be safe, I will give at least one option from both sides. So for Zach, on the survivor side, in my original video, I gave the 3 options of mercenary, batter, and novelist. In this one, I'm going to narrow that down and confidently say that in the strange event this does end up as a survivor-sided essence, Zach will probably absolutely be played by mercenary. Given his stamina and endurance throughout the series and his somewhat protective nature of Rachel, I feel like mercenary is really the only pick that makes sense out of the survivor lineup. Batter originally was only included in my predictions as a mean for his scythe's inclusion, but I think it would probably look wonky and the gameplay abilities just don't match up that well otherwise. Personally, if Zach does end up as a survivor, I'm pretty firmly on the side of him being our beloved crossover king mercenary. However, fortunately, for you people sick of mercenary getting crossover skins, I don't actually think that's going to be the case anymore. As I said before, I'm pretty confident now that this crossover will actually be hunter-sided in terms of the skins we get. Originally though, the reason I was so adamant about Zach being a survivor despite his character fitting much more in the role of a hunter was because I didn't feel that there were actually that many hunters that really fit him. Though there was always talk of him being Ripper in the fandom space, I honestly didn't care much for that theory since it would probably see the discarding of his weapon and look really strange on Ripper's model, especially with those long spindly fingers that don't really match up to Zach in any way. Sure, I mean, there would probably be ways to adapt it really nicely, such in cases like Tomy and similar skins in the past, but something about that just didn't feel right to me, so I've never personally subscribed to the Ripper theory. More likely in my mind was actually that we would get a skin of Undead for Zach. Although Undead isn't exactly the most popular character, I do think his mechanics fit pretty well with Zach's aesthetic and playstyle, so to speak, and his sword could easily be adapted into the scythe. I originally left this idea out of my original video, however, because I completely forgot about the Promised Neverland crossover, and I was uncertain if NetEase was able to use this character for crossovers. Thanks to being reminded of that in the comments, however, I'll mention it in this video and affirm that if my next theory is incorrect, Undead is probably my second best choice as to who we will see Zach end up as. However, I still think that there's a much better option. The reason, in my opinion, that we haven't heard anything else about this crossover yet. For a long while, I secretly wondered if maybe it had just been like canceled behind the scenes since we hadn't really heard anything new in a while, but now I think I understand why that is. Because, in my best guess, Zach is going to be the new and upcoming hunter Nightwatch. I mean, take a look at them side by side and tell me it doesn't make perfect sense. His long weapon would adapt almost perfectly into the scythe, and his model looks like it would lend very, very well to an adaptation of Zach's appearance. Now, I will say I'm not too sure how fitting Nightwatch's actual abilities lend themselves to Zach, but if I've learned anything from my many failed Bunga Dogs predictions, it's that sometimes they prioritize aesthetic over ability, and I think in this case it's entirely warranted. Oh, and not to mention, I would like to say that this one would probably be the shop skin, likely an S tier, though that does feel really soon to give Nightwatch another S tier right after his essence, if I'm correct on that being his role, so I'm not entirely certain about that, but I'll put it out there anyways. Now that being said, I've absolutely been wrong before, so remember that this is just my prediction, and I think it's a pretty safe one, and it also explains why it's been so long since we've heard anything about the crossover actually coming to light, but I still could be wrong. Moving on to Rachel Gardner, I originally assigned her to Little Girl without much thought. Though this is still a perfectly valid option for her in my opinion, I've actually changed my true prediction in the meantime to be that of Coordinator. Now, I do think the model is a bit tall for Rachel, given her age, but I could say the same about little girl being too short or too young looking in turn, so I think it's safe to say that in either case we have to pick the lesser of two evils, and here, in my opinion, that is actually Coordinator. If you've watched the anime or played the game, you'll know why giving her the flare gun is an absolutely outstanding option, and I think in this case, Rachel will probably be the only survivor character in an otherwise hunter-dominated crossover. So for you guys who are upset about the lack of hunters in Bungo Stray Dogs, hopefully I'm right, and you can look forward to only a single survivor in this one. That said, since I did promise to give all of the characters options from both sides to cover my bases, I'd say that I don't think there's really a great option here for Rachel as Hunter. If I have to force one out, I'll go with Sculptor, but that's really just a BS addition to say I played fair to both sides. Honestly, I'm really confident in my Coordinator pick, and if not that, it's safe to say that she'll probably end up as Little Girl like my original thought. I think it's also probably expected to guess if Zach does end up as a shop skin, Rachel would probably be an Essence S tier, but again, that's just my guess. Moving on to Danny, my least favorite of the group. No shade, of course, to Danny fans out there. Honestly, I'm less sure of this one. I do think if this crossover does take the survivor-sided route, Danny will absolutely find himself in the role of Professor. To me, that just makes the most sense, and I think the model would look nice. I don't really have much hard evidence for it, but I do think it's just probably the best option for him in a survivor-sided essence. As for Hunter, however, which I should clarify again, I do think he will be, I'm a bit more lost. There isn't really any Hunter in the game that to me screams Daniel Dickens, so of course, I'll just kind of cast a wide net on this one and pray I'm possibly somewhat right. First, the obvious counterpart to my survivor pick would be Evil Reptilian. I don't know if his abilities match up all that well, especially the jump. That's an utterly horrifying image to imagine for someone who doesn't like Danny. But in terms of other general aesthetics and vibes, I guess it's an okay option. Another option, probably the more likely one, could be Wax Artist. The abilities don't make a whole lot of sense and they probably have to adapt the model a lot, but there's a possibility for that to turn out as an option as well, and probably a tad more likely than Evil Reptilian. I think it could look nice if they do it a specific way. Whatever he ends up as, however, I just hope he runs Peepers. Next is Eddie, my personal favorite character. Once again, I'm pretty darn confident in my Hunter pick for this one. I can't see it going literally any other way, and if I'm right, I'll absolutely be gunning for this skin. But to be fair, if he does have to end up as a survivor, he'll probably be Gravekeeper, maybe Embalmer if you really want to push it. That still doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, especially given the age and height difference of these characters, but if I had to do it for Rachel, I'll be fair and do it for Eddie too. Disregarding that, because that's definitely not what they're doing, there is not a single doubt in my mind that Eddie is not Axe Boy. He is absolutely going to be Axe Boy. No questions about it. They are the perfect match in every way. And if NetEase doesn't take this absolutely outstanding golden opportunity to cross these characters over, I will probably just quit playing. That's a joke. I promise I'll keep playing, but I'll be very disappointed. Moving right along, next we have Kathy. I'm personally very fond of her as a character, and, well, like the others, I do think she will be a Hunter. I would say that if she does end up in the Survivor's role, it will probably be Coordinator. Now, I know I said Coordinator would be Rachel, but in this scenario, I would imagine Rachel would just go with Little Girl instead. I don't see this happening, but it's still technically an option. I also saw someone in the comments of my last video, I believe, saying Perfumer for Kathy. So if you want to give Rachel Coordinator and go Perfumer for Kathy, that's also an option, but I really don't see that happening. More likely, I imagine that Kathy will end up as the most fitting Hunter of all for her. Mad Eyes! Just kidding. I mean, it does make a lot of sense if you think about it, but that's absolutely not what NetEase would do. In reality, I think she'll probably just end up as Bloody Queen, like I said originally. I guess there's a really strange Dream Witch possibility out there somewhere too, but I'm not gonna bother to try and figure it out, so I'll settle on Bloody Queen for my pretty confident prediction, but if you want to argue Dream Witch in the comments, I want to hear it. Last, but certainly not least, is Reverend Gray. In terms of survivors, I would pretty safely say he'd probably end up as Magician or maybe First Officer, but again, I don't think that's really that likely, as I assume he'll probably also be a Hunter like the others. Now, as for which Hunter he'll actually be, I'm not entirely sure, but my money would probably be on Photographer or Hermit. Again, ability-wise, it's a little iffy in both cases, but I think they can absolutely sacrifice that for aesthetics. Not too much to say about this one. I think it's pretty cut and dry, just up to whatever NetEase decides is best to go with. All in all, I'm really excited for this crossover, and I hope we hear more about it soon. Though I obviously care a lot more about Bunga Stray Dogs than this one, I'm still pretty interested in Angels of Death and have watched the anime as well as played the game, and it's pretty interesting. If you're into this kind of stuff, I definitely recommend checking it out, especially before this crossover if you're interested in it. I think it's a really cool property to cross over with Identity V, given the shared aesthetics in some places, and yeah, that's really all I have to say about my predictions this time around. And thankfully this time there's no fireworks in the background of this video, unless something crazy happened that I didn't hear about, so that's cool too. I'm a lot more confident, not only in my predictions, but also in my YouTube channel and my video editing since last time I made a video covering this topic, so hopefully this one does a better job of actually expressing my thoughts and ideas. In either case, I hope we get to hear more about those crossovers soon, and it's been really fun to talk about my predictions for it. Thanks so much for watching, and thank you all for 900 plus subscribers. That's really exciting. I never thought I would get this far, so we're almost to 1,000. I'm really excited about that. So please consider watching another video if my content interests you, or subscribing if you haven't. It would mean a lot to me, because I really love doing this, and it's really fun to have all of you guys' support. Oh, not the video to say this in, but I'm going to anyway. I got recognized by someone who watched my videos in a match the other day for the first time. So shout out to you, that was really cool. Alright, have a good day everyone, bye.